Product Book Club is completely free for all participants and authors. It's running by enthusiasts, and we have great plans how to develop it further. If you like what we are doing, you can support us on Patreon or using one-off donations. Check out more details on productbookclub.com/support or in the details section under this video. Thanks!
Hello everyone, this is productbookclub.com, where we meet once a month to discuss a book related to product management. This month we're going to discuss The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick, and we have Rob with us joining us. For the ones that maybe it's the first time joining, feel free to make questions, give your feedback. Let's try to, or we usually try to make it more of a discussion, just a pure Q&A. So feel free to make questions during the hour. Just of course, make sure not to interrupt others and introduce yourself. Thanks everyone, and thanks Rob for joining us. Maybe we can start with yourself giving a bit of introduction.
Sure. Hey everybody, I'm Rob. I wrote the Mom Test book and some other stuff, and basically my journey has been, so when you look at entrepreneurship or product management, it's sort of the definition of the job is doing a bunch of things, right? It's like there's always a million responsibilities. You have to be strategic, you have to understand business, you have to understand product design, you have to understand people and customers and interviewing. And the founder's journey is like whatever you're good at, you don't get to do because you're always having to do the next thing that you're not good at. And it's similar with product management. And so I was a programmer, a techie, a product creator. I was studying video game design, and I got thrown into like the customer understanding, the sales, the what should we build, all that side of things. And my experience, which I guess, if you read the book, is that I tried really hard. We had good investors, we had the money. We worked on the business for 4 years, went through Y Combinator, we raised funding from some of Europe's best VCs. And I tried to do all the advice I was reading, and it just wasn't working. And, like people were lying to me. I was getting feedback, and we would do exactly what the customer said verbatim. And then 6 months later, they wouldn't use what we had built for them. And I'm like, you literally told me to build exactly this. And it took me a while, because, I'm naturally introverted techie. It took me a while to understand how this worked, but I eventually did. And I tried to write it up in the Mom Test. And it's just like, hey, look, it's not that people are lying to you out of malice, but there's a lot of confounding factors in these conversations, right? And so you can't necessarily just ask questions naively and expect to be told the truth. You need to be quite careful about how you structure the conversation, everything from the context and the environment to the way you ask the question, such that you can, get to the information you need, and then make your own decisions as the product manager or the entrepreneur. At the moment, I'm building a business to support independent nonfiction authors, trying to replace publishers with software and community and support. And so that's what I'm doing at Write Useful Books. But basically, I'm here to help out, and I'm still in it. I'm in the thick of it. I'm trying to figure out what my customers want so I can build the right stuff, just like you. If I can be helpful and answer questions, I would be delighted to do so.
Nice, thank you. Yeah, indeed. I was telling Rob at the beginning. I read the book some time ago, but I always had it there, and I think I always also recommend it to people when they are about to do interviews, right? Because it's very easy and tempting, right, to ask and to try to get that. I think you mentioned it on the book, right? We crave for this validation, and then to end the meeting being like, oh, they all love it, and they're all gonna pay for it as soon as it's done, right?
There's an important concept called the burden of truth, which is in a conversation, like whose job is it to tell the truth or to deal with the emotional consequences of telling the truth? And we've all experienced this in our relationships. Like you can go into a relationship and be like, what's wrong with you? And that's essentially pushing the burden of truth onto the other person, where you're putting them into a difficult conversation where they have to figure out how to navigate it and how to tell you what you're trying to learn. And it's hard to structure a conversation in a way which takes the burden of truth onto yourself. But when you do that, suddenly like the conversation flows and you're getting all this information. And this is the main thing. It's like, take responsibility for finding the truth, take responsibility for structuring the question in a way where the other person doesn't have to be unusually honest or unusually brave or unusually clever to tell you what you need to know, right? Because you've done your work ahead of time to create a context where it's natural and it's easy. It's the difference between like, what do you think about my idea is really hard for them to tell you the truth, right? Because you've introduced all this ego and emotion. Whereas like, how are you already dealing with this? It's easy for them to answer because that's like emotionally neutral. So it's just like understanding that there's emotions in every feedback conversation. And you know, it's your job to design around that emotion, not to expect the other person to be a robot.
Yeah, indeed. Nice. Are there any maybe questions coming from someone in the call that wants to start?
I have maybe one. I was a bit hesitant to ask, but I was doing recently a lot of interviews where I tried to take real life examples. But what I find hard is that sometimes I need to ask people to share with me how they do certain stuff, like basically share work files and share like documents that might be a bit confidential, let's say, especially when you record the interview. I was wondering if you have any tips on how to get past this awkwardness of like asking people to share their work stuff, which might be confidential, and kind of like get a better grasp of what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of sliding scales with customer learning. So one is the sensitivity of the information. Another is like the formality of the situation. And what you're basically trying to do. So to take a extreme example, like let's say that you were trying to build a product to help like victims of domestic abuse or like recovering addicts, for example. Or you know, people who were about to go to prison and were trying to prepare themselves for a prison sentence. Those are quite like emotional, but obviously important areas. And so it's unlikely that you're just going to be able to grab someone and be like, hey, so tell me how you deal with this. Like, because like you're cutting deep into their life, right? And it's important, but it's, you know, it's painful and it's personal. And so what you're looking to do is you're going like, okay, there's a sliding scale of honesty I'm likely to get in the responses. And like, you don't want to be making people uncomfortable. And this applies to all issues. Like you can't just charge into someone's office and be like, tell me about your budgeting process. And also you can't just charge into someone's life and ask about their personal issues. So the more sensitive something is, that inherently makes it more difficult to get full information. And so you go like, okay, well, what information can I get in a respectful way that's going to allow me to make better decisions so that I can better serve the people I care about? In some cases, you're not going to be able to ask them directly if it's a really sensitive issue. And in those cases, you go, okay, so if I can't ask them directly, either because they're not available or because they don't want to be identified or because they don't want to talk to me or whatever, you go, well, would it be possible to talk to a proxy, like, for example, an industry expert or a family member? Would it be possible to do it anonymously, which is way less good information, but it still is more than nothing? Would it be possible to observe them, for example, on a public forum where they're anonymously already talking about, you know, stuff and describing their workflow in their life? Is it possible to use analogs or to borrow someone else's firsthand research if like a medical organization or a doctor or whoever, a government organization has already done that research? Is there a way to access it? So in some cases, you can use intermediaries or experts as a way to borrow some, and like this is non-ideal, right? Because you're going to get worse information and it's going to be more biased and like, but like also it's like people's lives are people's lives and we can't assume that we're going to be able to get everything we want from them all the time. When people are like frustrated by an email workflow, they're delighted to talk about it because they're like, yeah, screw email, I hate it. You know, and then you can get everything you want. But, you know, not everything is that easy. And, you know, first be respectful. And then second, like getting 20% information is better than getting 0% information. If you can find a respectful way to do that, and then you combine that with rapid product iteration, right? Like essentially the 20% information you gather makes your product guesses better, which means that through product iteration, you're going to get to the correct result faster than you would otherwise. And sometimes that's all we can do.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
Maybe it's also linking it to, I see sometimes it's very easy to get a bit trapped, right, into how much info do we need to just start. At some point, you will just need to jump, right, and start testing it.
Yeah, there's diminishing returns with any learning. Like most customer learning is shaped like a logarithmic curve where it's like it flattens out. So the first few conversations are extremely dense with learning. And at a certain point, it flattens and you're hitting diminishing returns and you're not learning. You're not hearing anything new. You're not learning new stuff from the conversations. And then what I think doesn't come across in the literature is that it's like where it flattens out and where you stop learning is not the same for every project. And in some cases, it flattens out when you've learned very little. And in other cases, you can learn almost everything before it flattens out. And when you're a startup founder, one of the ways I pick ideas is by how much I'm going to be able to learn. And so I'm looking for opportunities which have like are open to aggressive early learning. But if you're working for another company, you're kind of stuck with the situation they've chosen, right? And so it might flatten out a lot sooner than you would like. And then you're like, okay, we've got less certainty than we would like. That's the reality. We've done the best we can. What are we going to do with that? Because there's no sense like banging your head against the wall forever trying to get certainty that's going to cost you 10,000 hours or whatever.
Yeah. Nice. Someone else? Any maybe input question?
Yeah, so I had one. So first of all, thank you for the book. It was really a nice read. So I really enjoyed it, especially for maybe non-native speakers. For me, it was very easy to read. So in chapter 4, you wrote another subheader, putting it together about a product idea you had regarding helping business investors to manage their deal flow. And then at the end, you wrote down then, okay, basically they told me everything right before the meeting, even before the meeting started. And my first question was then, okay, what are you doing then in this situation? You already got the answer. The meeting is about to start. You have nothing more you want to learn how to handle the situation, especially then as an introvert. So that would be interesting to know.
I actually, so the person I was talking to in that example was Philip Mooring, who at the time was with Seed Camp. And I later talked to both Philip and also one of the senior partners at Seed Camp, that investment firm, Carlos Espinal. And I basically replayed that conversation with them because I was kind of like, did I screw up? Right? Like, what should I have asked you? And what both of them pointed out is that it was correct that they weren't customers for what I was talking about. However, their analysts might have been customers because so in this example, it was basically like, I was like, oh, VC's got a ton of pitches. I'm going to build a product that helps them manage their pitches. The people I was talking to were the investors and they didn't feel the pain. But the reason they didn't feel the pain is because they had junior employees who had to deal with all the garbage. And so they were like, it's not my problem, but it might be my junior employee's problem. If it made them more efficient, I might pay for it. And so actually that was a case where I messed up because I didn't ask the correct follow-up questions, right? I took the rejection too quickly. And so there was no way I was going to convince them to buy it. But I could have used the opportunity to understand the rest of their organization and figured out who was bearing that pain. It's like, oh, your interns are dealing with it. Can I talk to them? That's the way I should have run that. So that was one option. Another option in terms of actually like when you're stuck in these meetings, you basically got two choices or three. I don't know. There's probably a couple. One is to literally just end it. Is be like, give them back their time. This sounds insane, but people love it because no one does this. And they're used to like a meeting is essentially lost time and they've already written it off of their schedule. And if you give them back that half hour or hour, they're so grateful. And I did this once with a big in-person pitch, and it's even weirder in person. Like online is easy. In person is super weird, right? I'd like commuted for an hour. I'd gone to this fancy music label in London. It was like this huge company. You walk through the fancy lobby, you wait for an hour. I go to the office. Like 2 minutes into the meeting, I'm like, I'm super sorry. I totally misunderstood what this was all about. Let me just leave. And the woman, Mandy, I still remember her name. She was like visibly shocked. She was like, no one has ever done that to me. And that's so polite that you would just give me back my time. And so she got an extra hour in her lunch. And then afterwards, she ended up making some incredible introductions for me, just because I'd like treated her time with respect. And one of the like meta lessons of all of this stuff, how do I say this? Sometimes you get into conversations that you cannot win. They are the wrong conversation. You're talking to someone who's grumpy, or they're busy, or they're just the wrong person. And the best you can do in that case is like respectfully back out, right? And if there's someone you already have a friendly connection with, just flip the conversation, be like, like, don't worry about my thing. How can I help you? Like, let's talk about your thing. You know, I was like, I've seen a bunch of companies in your industry. Let's just swap notes. Let me help you out. Because there's one of the challenges with doing like customer research inside a larger organization is that you've got a reporting hierarchy, and reporting hierarchies skew towards numbers and statistical significance and volume. So how do they know you're doing a good job? Well, because you've done 50 interviews or whatever. And so it's very tempting to try to make every interview count. But if you're a founder, you don't want to do that. And like at their best, like a product manager is a founder, right? But you need buy-in from the executive team, or you need to be pretty good at like managing your own space. And the last thing you want is to get feedback from a non-customer, right? Because then you're just muddying your own data. And if someone's not an enthusiastic customer or an early adopter, like you honestly don't care what they have to say, because all it's going to do is confuse you. And you want to get out of that conversation as quickly and politely as possible. And I see a lot with people, they're trying to make every meeting work, but like sometimes you're just in the wrong meeting. Cut loose, you know, that's the right move. And then it's like, what can I do then to preserve this relationship and deliver value to the other person so that they'll still be interested in replying to me the next time that I have something relevant for them. That's the way I would approach it.
Nice. And you mentioned now indeed sort of a bit of the difference with founders and product managers, right? Maybe discussing this, do you already see any big difference maybe when a founder sort of like approaches these interviews than a product manager, or something that you think is worth considering between the different?
Yes, there's a lot of differences. So the paper trail is actually something that founders screw up, because founders should be taking better notes. So a nice part of the management structure in product management is that you need to document what you're learning. And now that's getting way easier now that we're doing remote video interviews. So there's stuff like buildbetter.app or grain.co. Really good like video ways to pull out the insights from video so that people don't have to watch an hour of video. They can just watch the good bits. All these new transcription services. So it's easier than ever to like categorize and document the learnings from interviews. Startup founders tend not to do that because they're thinking, well, I'm making the decisions, so why do I need to write it down? But that introduces memory biases and emotional biases, like, because we don't remember the words that people say. We remember the way we feel about the words, or we remember the conclusions we draw from those words. And so founders lie to themselves a lot, even if they're asking good questions, by either having incorrect memories or drawing incorrect conclusions. So the note-taking is a case where the management structure really is helpful for product managers, and they do a better job on that side. Where it's harmful is the push towards statistical significance. If you're doing A/B tests, if you're doing website analytics, if you're doing like optimizing a conversion funnel, you care about statistical significance. If you're doing one-on-one customer interviews, statistical significance is poison, because it causes you to have lots of shallow interviews when what you need is a few deep interviews. And it just creates all the wrong incentives. But it's hard, right? Because it's really hard to go to the CEO and be like, I did 5 conversations, and they're like, woo, they're like 5, like, fuck you, like, you're fired. Like, what are you even doing? And you're like, but if you were a founder, you would much prefer 5 deep conversations over 500 shallow ones. And so this is a case where, and also sometimes in the management hierarchy, especially with really big companies, they want the one pager. They're like, put it in a pie chart, but I can guarantee that any customer research that you can put on a one pager is not good customer research. Because if you can turn it into a chart, you could have just Googled it. You didn't need to do original research. And so, like, by definition, like, if you can present it as a one pager, then you're wasting your time. And so you kind of need to be able to manage up pretty aggressively. And I should also say that, like, I've never been a good product manager, right? So I think I'm a good founder, but you're dealing with a more complicated situation than I've ever had to deal with. So the statements I'm making are based on what I've seen as failures in other organizations, not as something I've actually lived through. But I think you need to be able to manage up in a way that's hard, right? Because you need to say, like, look, this is what we're doing. It's going to be messy. You're going to have to, like, look at transcripts. I'm going to try to boil it down for you. And if you don't have that buy-in, I'd essentially go through the motions, waste everyone's time, and start looking for your next job, because you're not going to be able to do well if you don't have buy-in from the people above you.
Yeah, no, that's true.
In my opinion.
Yeah, I recognize that. Yeah, I feel it. Is there someone else, Phil?
Yeah, I've got a question. So I do have to admit I'm halfway through the book, so I am enjoying it. I've just struggled to find the time to finish it. So feel free to say this is completed in the second part. My question's about so, like, what your book does for me is it really opens the bias of, like, how we ask the questions, but, like, how much is around like the environment, like, are people getting paid for the research, how smiley is the person asking the questions, versus, like, how much are all those other biases impacting it, do you think? And, like, do you mitigate those as well?
Yes, there's a variety of biases. A big one is the formality of the context. And so if you meet someone in, like, a fancy glass boardroom, you're already screwed. And I can almost guarantee you'll learn nothing. No matter how you ask the questions, because the formal context, if they're a customer, like someone you're trying to sell, it basically, like, it puts them into either a very defensive mindset or a very, like, trying to impress you mindset. And they're basically focused on either not giving you any negotiation leverage, or they're focused on sounding impressive and clever, if you're in an impressive context. So when I was doing in-person meetings, it was night and day if I met people in their sales room or like boardroom or whatever, versus if we were chatting in the cafe in the corporate lobby. Same building, same company, same person, but, like, completely different quality of learning. If you're bringing people into your office, it's similar. Like, the more formal you make it, the tougher it gets. Now, what's confusing about this is that this doesn't apply to all types of customer learning. Okay, so user tests, it doesn't matter. So user test is like, hey, try to do this on the app. We're going to film you. Is that cool? Talk through your thinking. For user testing, you can pay people. You can put them in a formal context. You can do it as a group. It doesn't really matter. However, for, like, the customer development style interviews where you're trying to understand their decision making, their worldviews, their goals, their current behavior, their frustrations, super impactful. And so it's a case where, like, can you pay for user tests? Yeah, definitely. Go for it. It's, like, great. It's easy. You'll get, like, data at scale. Can you pay for cus dev interviews? Never. Because there's also a selection bias. Like, what do you pay for a customer development interview? Like, I mean, normally I'm goofing around. Like, I'm doing this for free because, it's fun, right? But normally for people to pay for my time, it costs $10,000 an hour. And so imagine if you wanted to sell to people like me. Are you going to pay me $10,000 to answer an hour's worth of your questions? No way. you're going to pay $50. Am I going to say yes to $50? No. So like by the nature of the incentive, you're only getting people who are shitty in terms of their, like, if your customers are minimum wage workers, then by all means pay them, because then you're going to be selecting for your customers. But if you're trying to target business customers and you're paying them $50 for an hour of their time, you're out of your mind, because you're intentionally selecting non-customers. And if you find someone who is in your profile, like they have the link, then you're selecting for crazy people, because only crazy people would agree to answer a survey for $50, right? So like there's a massive incentive. But like, again, user testing, it doesn't matter, because user testing, you're saying like, hey, can you do this on my website or app? Try it. Like in that case, it doesn't matter if they're exactly your customer segment. But like the selection bias matters so much, the context, like all this stuff. I would never pay for a custom dev interview. And also another tough thing to stomach, and this is another case where also the skew towards statistical significance really hurts you, because you're like, fuck, I need 50 interviews in a week. How am I going to get them? You're already screwing yourself, right? Like the whole battle is arrayed against you already. You're in a losing game. You need to be saying, like, a better way to think about it is like, okay, to build this product properly, we need like a big batch of insight at the beginning. Like, so how can we arrange a bunch of interviews? Then after that, we need an ongoing drip of like insights and access to our future customers. So what can we create or arrange, or like, how can we set it up such that that ongoing flow of information is coming in, that like ongoing contact with our customers in a valuable way? There's a bunch of ways people do this. Some people do it by setting up like a client lunch club. And then like every week, a bunch of clients come in and talk about their problems. Songcake, which was a music business, they did it by hosting live events and inviting live music events at their office and inviting their most active users each Friday to come to a free live show for amazing bands that you couldn't even buy tickets to. Resin.io did it by turning every support request, and instead of just saying, yeah, we'll deal with that, they said, hey, let's jump on a call and talk through it. So their customers were getting incredible support, and they were turning that into their customer learning. So like early on, you'll do like a batch of interviews, but over time, if you want to scale it, you're looking for a way to integrate it with the activities that your business is running every week. In some cases, that means creating new activities, but ideally it aligns with what you're already trying to do. That was kind of a rant.
No, thank you. That
sorry.
was really, really useful. I liked the fact. So personally, I found like Reddit and TikTok and places like that and Instagram, when someone says something and then the sentiment gets voted up by everyone else, you start going, there's something in that's like a universal problem, or that's a universal need, or I've really enjoyed that in terms of research.
So Amy Hoy has a great phrase for this. She calls it a sales safari, or a customer safari. And the idea is like when you go on safari, you're not interacting with the animals, but you're going to where the animals are, and you're like observing them in their natural habitat and taking photos. And it's a kind of whatever they call it, anyway, it's basically like going to where people are and watching what they do. There's some industries, some customers, and some problems where you honestly don't need to do any of your own research, because they are so vocal about complaining about every aspect of their day that you can just go to these public forums, observe what they're already complaining about, and draw pretty good conclusions. There's others, like, especially in areas like Sophia mentioned earlier, where it's a sensitive topic or a deeply personal problem, where those conversations are not happening. And there's also some where they're really skewed by bravado. Like any topic around money, around security, around blah, blah, blah. People are like, yeah, I'm always a genius and I'm super rich all the time and people love me. Like, you're like, and so in those cases, the dialogue that's happening publicly, you can tell is garbage, and you're not going to bet your business on that. And so then you go like, okay, this is just completely skewed, right? Because everyone's in like imaginary, aspirational la la land of who they think they are and who they think they want to be. And like, like you never want to be doing original research about stuff you could have Googled, but there's a lot of stuff you can't Google. And part of your job is to recognize the difference and be like, can I just Google this? Or be like, actually, no, that's garbage. I need to do original research on this. And you know, that's it's a balance, right? But that's why you have a job, because it's hard and you're smart. So someone needs to make a smart decision about how to allocate that time and effort.
There has to be someone to blame if it was a wrong decision as well. But yeah, I think indeed, like you said, right, it's also very important to identify or acknowledge on what stage the product is, right? Because if it's really at the beginning, yeah, indeed, right, it's way different than when you already have prototypes and everything.
And it's also important to, I don't have a full framework for this, but there's like incremental innovation. Like if you're building the next mobile phone, we pretty much know now what makes a mobile phone good. If you're building the next one, you do your usability testing, but you don't need to do like deep customer research into problems and goals and all that stuff, because you're like, yeah, I know how people engage with phones. Fine. Yeah. And you're like, I'm going to make it so it folds in the middle. It's like, cool. That's like a cute trick. Do people like it or not? All right, fine, test it, whatever. If you're doing something like 3D printing meat in the house, like it's a new kitchen appliance, 3D print your own meat that doesn't come from animals. It's like, wow, like now we're like, this is weird and new, right? And it's like, there's no precedent, there's no analog, there's no, that's not incremental, that's like disruptive, or it's a jump, it's a leap, it's jumping into unknown territory. You go, well, people spend this much on meat. Okay, but is that going to translate to like meat they've printed on their kitchen counter? Who knows? And so in like recognizing the type of innovation you're doing is important, because you're going to grab different tools from your toolkit, right? Yeah. If you're trying to figure out like, is the value proposition this or this, but you already have a ton of traffic, well, like, fuck it, just A/B test it. It's like zero effort. You don't need to be a smart person to do that. But if it's like a new thing, like you'd have to be super stupid to 3D to like try to A/B test like meat printing, like, because that's much deeper, right? Like you have to understand how people view the world and their place in it and the ethics and everything.
Yeah. Nice. Someone else question or feedback?
Yeah, I got a question. I work Sainsbury's in the UK. As a product manager, we're very internally focused. So would there be anything in your approach that you would amend, change for focusing on internal customers? Or is there anything within the approach that you'd say this would be the thing to kind of mainly focus on as well?
Internal, so like building internal tooling and processes and that sort of stuff?
Internal products, so building apps, working with third parties, working with SaaS suppliers and things as well.
Yeah, it's great because you have access to everyone you need to have access to, and they will always accept the conversation. And they'll even let you watch them work, which is very nice. And normally people don't let you do that. And the internal tooling is interesting because we're so aspirational about our own processes. We go, yeah, like imagine if we had a tool, a digital tool, and everything's in it, the checklist and the blah, blah, blah. But then you're like, what are you replacing? Well, you're replacing phone calls, which have instant feedback and can be improvised. And you're replacing Post-it notes on the wall, which everyone can see, and they don't need to remember to open a website or click around, and it still works if the internet's down. And you're replacing their personal phones and tablets, which they always have in their pocket and they like. And I think with internal tooling, we tend to get especially oblivious to the trade-offs. This is true with all product creation, but we think about, when you're changing workflows, we think about the benefits, but we don't think about what's being given up. So we go, yeah, this is better than Post-its because dunk-a-dunk-a-dunk. But it's like worse than Post-its for all these other reasons. Like, I have to remember to open a website. It's not on the wall. Not everyone can see it. We can't gather around it. Like, blah, blah, blah. And so for internal tooling, I'd be really interested in this. And this is a tough question to ask. But it's like, we've tried to fix this before. Why did none of those solutions work? Why are we still doing it with Excel and telephone calls? Like there must be a reason. Like what's the benefit here? And then trying to go incrementally in the same way you would with customers, where it's like, okay, here's a simple change to the current Excel and Post-it note workflow. Let's iterate on that. Are people adopting it? Are they not? Like I have ADHD, and one of the like challenges socially around it is that there are things that I am bad at and that I'm going to have trouble doing that are easy for other people, right? Which creates a blame scenario where people go, why didn't you do that thing? It's so easy. And it's like, well, it's hard for me. But that's like hard. That's a hard conversation to have, because they're like, it should be easy, just try harder. And I feel like we fall into the same trap with internal tooling, where we're like, just use the process. Just do better. Just use the checklist. Just remember to go to the website. Just remember to document your steps. And it's like, that's not how humans operate, dude. But it's hard to say that, because they're like, well, fucking try harder or we'll fire you, you know? And so if you're like the tooling creator, I think being able to acknowledge that it's like, yeah, we're messy, irrational, meaty robots, but there's like a reason that we're doing things with Post-it notes and telephones, right? And it's like, it's not because we're stupid. It's because they have unseen benefits, and try to pull that out.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Someone else has a question?
Yeah, I have one maybe. So a little bit of, it's quite a while since I read the book as well. But what I was wondering is if you have some kind of hook or like really short summary that gets people to understand the general concept of the book without just telling them kind of like read the damn book or doing interviews yourself. So the sense where I'm facing that a little bit is, for example, like working on a company together, and you have different roles where people are, for example, supposed to talk to the customers because they are more on the sales side and so on, right? But they are oftentimes then saying like, yeah, we're gonna just call up the customers and ask what they think about the ideas. And I'm like, you know, so is there something that kind of gets them thinking in that direction that you could recommend or tip that you have?
Yeah, so the main idea, I don't know, I mean, there's different ways you can describe it. It depends on the person you're talking to in the situation. But the main idea is that like people don't know what they want. And so asking them what they want is not going to end up going well. It's like, you know, it's like we've all made New Year's resolutions. We've been like, this year I want this, and then we don't do it. Like we've all bought weird gadgets from Amazon that we never use. Like people don't know what they want. Like, and it's not the customer, like, it's not the customer's job to tell us what they want. Sorry, let me rephrase that because that's a little bit fuzzy. It's not the customer's job to tell us which product to build. It's the customer's job to explain their goals and their problems and their situation and their current behavior. And then it's our job to figure out what we should build for them. And that's it. And like, so that's the first stage. And then the second stage, which is a bit more salesy, is like, if I go to you and I go, I have this incredible product, it's going to change your life. What do you think? Like, you're of course going to say like, wow, that sounds really cool, Rob. You're a smart dude. Right? Because like, why wouldn't you? Like a compliment is free. And otherwise you're creating an argument that's like super boring and uninteresting for you to have. But if I go like, if I say that same thing, I'm making this amazing product and you go, wow, it's super cool. It's like, hey, listen, like no pressure, but if you want, we're starting early access in 3 months. If you want to put down 10 grand, you know, I would love to have you in that group. And like, you no stress over it, but we'll be there. We'll solve all your problems. We'll help you get started with it, etc. And just by adding that second piece to the pitch, even pre-launch, just asking for something. It doesn't have to be money, but asking for something. Like suddenly they go, oh no, I mean, it's a super cool idea, but I'm good. Just, you know, let me know when it launches and I'll check it out. And you go, all right, cool. You know, and then like you're like not a customer, or at least not one of my first customers. And people get that, like salespeople get the idea of qualifying a pipeline. However, they don't know how to qualify a pipeline before there's something to sell, because they're used to qualifying a pipeline by like moving the sale forward. And so if you're still pre-launch, you're just like, hey, this is a way to qualify a pipeline and figure out who's interested and who's not pre-launch. If you pitch what we're doing, like ask for something in return. You can ask for time, reputation, money, or secrets. No, like, oh, wow, I get that. And then another way you can phrase it is like, hey, you're already having these pitch conversations. You're already having these pitch conversations. They go, yeah. You go, listen, once you pitch it, they get defensive because they're thinking about negotiation. They're like, makes sense. It's like, so just before you pitch, open up 5 minutes and ask some of this stuff so you can learn what they're already doing and why. Then you can go do your normal sales thing. They're like, all right, fine, I can do that. And like, please take good notes and share what you learned. It's like, okay. And sometimes they come back with like surprise. They're like, wow, they don't care at all. We are building totally the wrong thing. And it's like, you're like, it's just not normally the way they see their job. And so you're saying like, you still get to do your job. You still get to sell. Just like 5 minutes, open the space, figure out what they're already doing and why. And if you pitch, always ask for a commitment. That's the advice I would give.
Thanks. Yeah, that's very good. I think so. Not kind of trying to tell them what to do, but steer them a little bit into the direction of there is another part to it as well, right? And then I think especially also with kind of the follow-up or getting something in return, I think that can also drive the behavior change there, because if they see they are pitching it, but they're never getting anything, right? Then this can, I think, also help open up the conversation, explore it maybe a little bit more, like that part.
Part of it's company culture as well. Like I prefer not to create performance-based sales incentives until after product market fit, because early on, sometimes the correct answer is that we could sell to them, but we shouldn't, because they don't represent a large market, or because like we have a personal connection and we could convince them, but we're not going to be able to convince other customers in the same way. And so like early on, you want your salespeople to feel like they can come back and be like, good news, they don't care at all. Like we can drop these features. And if you've got performance-based incentives like sales commissions, that's never going to happen. And again, this is like part of the challenge of being a product manager, right? And it's often why product managers have to duplicate the efforts of the sales teams, because the sales teams are incentivized wrong. And so you have to do their job again, which is obviously incredibly harmful for the overall organization. But sometimes that's the reality.
Cool. Someone else with another question or feedback, or maybe a comment about some part of the book?
Yeah, I'd like to jump in here because that's so interesting. I've read your book this year for the first time, and I was heading into my first interviews directly, and I learned so much, and we touched already so many levels. Like what is the purpose you'd like to get to know? So what I found out in my latest research was really interesting. Like I said, I think we do have a problem with, or I do have a challenge now with the problem solution fit and the product market fit. It seems like we're building a product currently where I'm saying it's not live now, but I think these decisions have been done before from the management, and being in those interviews, it was really tough one to find out, is this really something people would like to have, or was this just a bad recruiting? So how do you find out these questions, like once you get into this one, because that's really interesting. Also, maybe you can find, because what I remember reading your book was like, it seems, for me, it seems, at least that's what I remember, it was much more a focus on B2B, not that B2C, and selling it to the users. So it's a full range, but maybe you just jump in what comes into your mind.
Yeah. So the path toward product market fit, I would love to have a clear answer on, because that would be worth $1 trillion. but the experience I've had is that it's not a moment. It's like a stacking up of data points, and so you're getting little pieces of evidence that it's like, oh, like we're on the right track, or like, oh, this is. And people have tried to define it around NPS or these survey results, or like they've tried to quantify it, which I get is super helpful if you're an investor and you have a portfolio. But my experience as an entrepreneur is like, well, like I'm not going to quit suddenly. It's like, I don't wake up one day and I'm like, oh, I've got product market fit done. Like, it's like, all right, I'm grinding. And like, I think I'm there now with my current business, but it's like, well, we got to improve it now. Like there's still a million other things to figure out. It's like, what it does make me how do I describe it? So there's a moment when you're talking to customers where it feels like you've already got their worldview loaded into your head. What they're saying isn't surprising you. You've got a very accurate model of their goals, their problems, their aspirations, their current decision-making problem. This applies to both consumers and to businesses. And it's quite neat when you talk to investors as a founder, because they grill you on all of this. And I've been in investment meetings where I did not know, and I was trying to bluff my way through it. And I've been in investment meetings where I'm like, oh no, they do it this way because of this, and this happens, and this happens, and blah, blah, blah. And afterwards, I'm like, oh, wow, I actually understand this industry. But it's hard to know until someone forces you to talk through it in a way that like you can't really bullshit. And at a certain level, you understand it, you understand them, you've seen their reaction to what you're talking about or building. You're like, yeah, this fits perfectly into their life. And that's not like bravado or confidence. It's like, you've seen it and you're like, yeah, it's shitty right now. We need to do a way better job on a bunch of things. But like, this is an important piece of their life. Anyway, that's how I think about product market fit. I think the line in the sand is a bit of a, it makes sense when you're backwards looking, but it doesn't help when you're trying to go forward looking and reach it, right? And people go like, that's okay. It's like being in love, like, you know it when you found it, and then you like commit hard to it. And it's like, okay, fine, that's useful. But like, also it's like, it would be nice to be able to find love, right? Or like to have some, like a compass that led you in approximately the right direction. And, I don't know. If you figure out the answer, please write a book about it. I'm sure a lot of people would love to read it. As for the B2C versus B2B stuff, I divide it on well-defined problem versus undefined or implicit problem. So a lot of B2B problems are well-defined. They go, we need this. This is a problem. We have a budget. We can spend this much money to get a solution. But also consumers sometimes have those problems as well. They go, oh man, my like kid is home from school on quarantine and I need homeschooling and it's worth this much money to me. And like, I need that problem solved. In both cases, the customer development and customer understanding is the same, regardless of whether they're consumers or businesses, because they understand their problem. They know they need a solution and they know how much money it's worth to them. And in those cases, you can both understand them as a customer, and you can also validate whether you're building the correct solution and get a pretty good signal about whether or not they're likely to pay for it, even before you built the thing. The other case is like an undefined problem. It could be implicit. It could be an incremental improvement to something they're already using. Like, so Uber was an incremental improvement to sticking your hand in the air. No one had a problem with cabs before Uber, but like Uber made it incrementally better in an important way. When that's the case, you can do customer understanding or discovery. You can understand what they're already doing and why, but you cannot do validation. You cannot confirm that you're building the right thing until you have a prototype. And there's like some pretty dramatic failures who didn't understand this distinction. For example, the Segway, the little wheelie two-wheel thing. They did their customer discovery very well. Everyone hates traffic. Cities are over congested. Pollution is a problem, blah, blah, blah. And then they made their mistake. They said, wouldn't you love if you could travel around a city without needing to find a parking space, without needing to pay for a car, without blah, blah, blah. People said, yeah, that would be amazing. That would change my life. It's incredible. But they were wrong, because the segue in their head was like an incremental improvement to the car. It's like not a very well-defined problem. It's not explicit. And once people got on them, they're like, well, I feel a bit stupid. There's no way I'm driving this thing to work, or a date, a first date on a Segway, you cruise up with your helmet, like that's not going to fly. And so that was a case where they did their discovery, but they needed to build a prototype and do product-led iteration to figure out if they were building the right thing. This also applies if you're building deep into the future, like 3D printing, a lot of crypto stuff. Like you can't like talk to people and be like, would you like a distributed autonomous organization? Or they're like, I guess, I don't know what you're talking about, man. Leave me alone. What, you want $1? Like, I don't know what's happening right now. What is this interaction? And so in those cases, like Segway, Uber, crypto, like you need to lead with a prototype. You understand people first, and then you lead with the prototype. This is what Steve Jobs did with the iPhone. Like he famously said, he's like, focus groups are for losers. I'm paraphrasing. He didn't quite say that. He's like, don't ask customers what they want. But that doesn't mean he didn't understand them. He understood customers, but then he led with a prototype. Like the early versions of the iPhone were very like, it's a prototype, and they iterated each year, and they got to something important. So like you can always do customer understanding, but you cannot always do validation. And typically in consumer facing businesses, it is much more common that you need to lead with the prototype. Whereas just because consumer things tend to be less well-defined, but it's about the definition of the product more so than the customer segment.
Maybe one last question or comment from someone, also checking at the time. If there is one.
Carlos, I don't have a question, just a comment.
Yeah.
I really love the book. I'm not a startup owner. I'm just working in a corporate company, but my best friend is the company owner. And I'm also always the test rabbit for all these kind of questions. And every question I read, he asked me this question. He asked me this question as well. So I'm definitely giving him this book as a present for Christmas so that he can reshuffle the way he asks the questions.
Nice. Awesome. Someone else, any other comments or questions?
I really love the book as well, and this conversation is like super insightful. I love it.
Thanks. Maybe I have one final question that I sort of like struggle as well personally, that at some point you will find indeed an idea that it just doesn't work, right? And I think on the book is, of course, the founders of this small group, maybe if they're all on the same page with you, they will also get to the same conclusion, right? Like, okay, it doesn't work, let's leave it. But when you are maybe a product manager and you have a bigger team, right? Not everyone will always be there. So at some point you need to also deliver this that, guys, you know what? This is not the right idea. Some might be more okay, but some might be more like attached, right? Like, no, but we need to build it, or like, no, you didn't do the right, you didn't ask the right question, right? So how do you, facilitate or make it a bit easier maybe to indeed convince or let everyone know that, okay, this idea, guys, maybe, sometimes we invested some time as well building it, but we just need to drop it.
My biggest regret about the book, the biggest mistake I made while writing it is pointing toward giving up as the obvious path. It's like, oh, customers don't want it, it's not going to work. That's a mistake on my part, and I regret it. And it's something that I plan to change or clarify when I create an updated version. What I would say now is, like, when you don't get a strong customer signal, what are you going to change? Giving up completely is one of the things you could change, but there are a lot of other things you could change also. Do you change the customer segment? Do you change the way the value proposition is described? Do you change the feature set? Do you change the whatever, the market timing? The metaphor I like is like if you're driving somewhere, and there's like an obstacle in the road, these country back roads, there's like a tree has fallen across the road. You don't go like, oh darn, let's go home. You go, oh, this road's blocked. I'm glad we had our headlights on so we could see it, right, and not slam into it at full speed. But let's like reverse, even though that's frustrating and going to make us late, and let's find another way to our destination. That adds time and that adds cost to product creation, but it is part of the process. And that's the way I would describe it now. And there's some business opportunities and some products where you have very little information ahead of time.
Yeah.
You're driving further down like a 1-lane road. And if you hit an obstruction, you're going to have to reverse for hours, right? Like, because you just don't have good information or visibility. And it's like, okay, well, you can kind of anticipate that ahead of time. And are you up for that sort of journey and that sort of risk? Like that's a decision that the team makes together. If so, you go like, I mean, this isn't going to work. We can't just like confidently drive through the tree in the road, right? It's like, it's there. Like, so what are we going to do about it? In some cases, it's timing. Like Steve Blank in 4 Steps to the Epiphany, he talked about sometimes you're building something that's so deep in the future that your customers don't even know about it yet.
Yeah.
And his answer here is like, raise a ton of money because it's going to add 5 years to your journey. And you need to be able to wait with your car until the tree decays, let mushrooms do their work. Or I'm stretching my metaphor here.
But indeed, I think what you mentioned is right? That it's not always like, okay, we won't do it and let's dissolve the team, but maybe this way doesn't work. Let's see how we can turn it around, right?
One of my biggest frustrations with like modern entrepreneurship is that, so when you run an experiment, an MVP, a test, or whatever, if customers love it, that means a lot, right? That means you're nailing it and you need to do more of that. Keep going. If nobody cares, that actually carries very little information. Because were you talking to the right people? Did you run the conversations properly? Did you describe it in the right way? Are you building, like, there's so many obscuring, like when it's correct, it's correct. When it's incorrect, all you know is that experiment didn't work. It doesn't mean the idea didn't work. It means that experiment didn't work. So you go, okay. Now, if a bunch of those don't work in a row, maybe you make the executive decision. You're like, actually, this whole thing's just a total dead end. And sometimes you do hear that. Sometimes you talk to a customer and you're like, they literally do not care at all. And then, you know what? Like, look, if you've got people above you, they might be assholes. This is like a reality of life. They might put the blame on you unfairly, even though you've done exactly what it was your job to do, which is to figure out if this is an opportunity and to execute on it to the best of your capacity. If that's the case, flip them the finger, move on, find a job working for like less annoying people. For the people below you, if that happens, as their manager, you can do a lot to make sure that they all get wonderful jobs at another company, because no one's testimonial or endorsement is going to mean more than their direct managers, right? So when something shuts down, you go, like it shuts down. Like it doesn't make sense to like slam into this wall at 100 miles an hour. Like ultimately, like my fate is in the hands of the people above me. Are they going to get it or are they going to be dicks? Whatever. The people below you are like your responsibility. So if the people above you are dicks, like make sure the people below you are protected and like find them a place somewhere else. Like, and you can. And that's how I think about it. If you're a founder, it's like, investors are grown-ups. You tell them that you fucked up and you lost their money, but it's really not even you fucking up. It's like, hey, we all together believed in this opportunity. I executed on it to the best of my capabilities. It didn't work out. Like what I think we should do now is shut down. Like, what's your take on it? And then, in my experiences, they go, yep, that makes sense. Let us know what you start next. We would love to invest in it. Because right, they're like, it's a high risk business.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. I'm checking the time as well. Maybe now we can take like the picture for the ones that have the book or the ones that want to show their face. All right. Yeah, I will count then.
It's fun to see these UCL copies here springing up.
Oh, yeah. 3, 2, 1. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Yeah, hope we see you next month. And yeah, thanks a lot, Rob, for joining and for the discussion.
Yeah, my pleasure. If there's extra questions or whatever, I'm pretty easy to find via robfitz.com. And I wrote a couple other books, one about education and one about nonfiction. So, if you're into those things, you can find them. And yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Product Book Club is completely free for all participants and authors. It's running by enthusiasts, and we have great plans how to develop it further. If you like what we are doing, you can support us on Patreon or using one-off donations. Check out more details on productbookclub.com/support or in the details section under this video. Thanks!